Zoe was puzzled by Derek's reaction, as all he could talk about was the money they were putting into their 1920s craftsman house they purchased last year. That's when she realized she couldn't stand Derek anymore. "I work on some Saturdays doing bookkeeping, but you went and spent $1,000 on clothes? What about the plumber's bill? How can you spend so much on clothes when we still owe the plumber $3,000? She didn't respond to Derek's questions. She just left the room crying and went into their bedroom, slamming the door behind her. Derek found the bedroom door locked. Zoe was sitting on the bed, thinking that at least something in the house was working. He knocked on the door and waited. After a short while, she opened the door, but instead of talking to Derek, she hurried past him. As Derek entered the kitchen, she emerged from the basement with 2 red Milwaukee tool cases. "Why can't I get nice things like these too?" she asked, holding up the cases. Derek looked bewildered. "I bought a power drill and a sander. I use both tools to fix things myself instead of getting help from a professional handyman or painter." She didn't know how to respond, so she chose to angrily leave the kitchen and tell him to go away. Their relationship stayed tense for the rest of the weekend. They didn't talk much and didn't kiss goodnight, even though they shared the same bed. When Zoe arrived at work on Monday, she was feeling frustrated and needed to talk about it. She ended up confiding in her coworker, Paul Roberts, who came by her desk to greet her and ended up listening to Zoe's problems. After being reminded by their boss to work, Paul proposed they chat during lunch. Between her salad bites, Zoe complained to Paul about being tired of budgeting. Paul listened attentively to Zoe's complaints. Paul thought Zoe was being rude, not considering her husband's feelings. But like any man interested in a married woman, he pretended to understand her completely. They decided to meet for lunch again on Tuesday. As a result, Zoe and Paul had lunch together every day that week. By Wednesday, Paul started saying mean things about Derek, suggesting he didn't realize how great his wife Zoe was. After just 1 month, Zoe believed that all the problems in her life were because of Derek, particularly the lack of money they had. Zoe wanted a house with a yard before having a child, so she suggested buying a fixer-upper. However, she ended up blaming Derek for the effort and money needed to make the house safe and livable. The plumbing, electrical system, woodwork, and floors were all old and needed repairs. Spending time with Paul made Zoe realize she had less respect for Derek. Eventually, Zoe started spending Saturdays with Paul instead. Her actions showed she had little respect left for Derek as she continued her relationship with Paul. The love Zoe had for Derek when they got married 5 years ago was gone. One day, Zoe was in bed with Paul, feeling satisfied after their second intimate moment. Zoe was deeply attracted to Paul, who made her feel incredible when they were together. Paul was able to please her 3 times in a row, something that amazed Zoe. The intense pleasure made her feel unbelievably good, almost causing her to faint when he was intimate with her from behind. Paul mentioned that he wished they could do it every day. Although Zoe enjoyed the idea, there was a concern. "It sounds great, but not really doable. If I leave Derek, I'd have to pay for half of what we owe. I had a chat with a lawyer about it already. I have to pay for half of the mortgage and all the other debts from buying that old house that needs a lot of fixing. Derek's income is the only thing keeping us financially stable. Even if we combine our incomes, we don't earn enough for me to divorce him and pay what I owe." Paul found it challenging to figure out the right time to talk about this. He had a plan to help the Millers with their money issues. Paul knew other people were struggling with debts too, but he thought it was best to wait a bit longer before sharing his idea. Paul started to mention to them on some Saturdays and during their lunches that money was the only thing causing issues between them. After talking about it for a while, Zoe mentioned something that had been on her mind for a while. It was about a life insurance policy that Derek had, worth a lot of money, and Zoe was the person who would get it if anything happened to him. Paul was really surprised by this news. "What do you mean?" "If we could figure out a way for him to pass away, I'd get the insurance cash and we could be with each other." Paul acted like he didn't understand. "Have you considered how we could make it happen?" "No, I haven't. I've never taken a life larger than a bug. I wouldn't have a clue how to do it or escape without getting caught. It wouldn't help us to hurt him and then land in jail." Paul nodded. "I think some people can get away with crimes easily," Zoe said, sitting up to face Paul. "Do you think you could kill someone?" she asked, suggesting a plan where it would look like a robbery gone wrong. Paul wasn't keen on the idea. He had watched movies like Body Heat, where a wife tricks someone into killing her husband, and he knew it never ended well. The wife gets to leave and receives the insurance money, while the man ends up being blamed for everything. Paul decides that for their plan to work, Zoe would be the one to commit the murder. Despite thinking about it a lot, he didn't want to appear too eager. Zoe and Paul were in bed discussing how to kill her husband. Paul kept quiet to hear Zoe's ideas. Her suggestions seemed unbelievable, making him struggle to hold back his laughter. Eventually, he couldn't contain himself any longer and asked, "Wasn't the electrical panel old?" Zoe confirmed, "Yeah, Derek found it difficult to get the correct fuse when needed. It uses traditional screw-in fuses. He asked me to go to a specific store to buy new parts when he discovered they had them. Derek wants to change the panel when we have enough money for it. That's how we'll catch him," Paul said. He showed how they could use pennies in the fuse socket to avoid the fuse. Paul explained to Zoe that they needed to ensure only Derek's fingerprints were on the coins. Zoe was shocked to hear this plan, as she never imagined she would be involved in something as serious as murder, especially considering her feelings for Derek in the past. Zoe knew that the $1 million insurance policy Derek had bought last year, when they talked about starting a family, influenced her decision. She worried, "Will they figure it out? How can I make it look like an accident? Has Derek told anyone about our problems? I can't recall when we were intimate last. Perhaps he's talked to someone about it, like a friend or colleague. If that's the case, you need to work on it. It's time to bring back the spark in your relationship with your partner. Show him you're still in love." "I'm not sure if I'm capable of that. Just being near him gives me the creeps. When he has sex with you, just remember the big reward waiting for us. $1 million can help you bear with him. Imagine how much time it would take working at Koppel & Sons to earn $1 million. Zoe considered the idea, but she found it difficult to envision committing the actual murder at that moment. Thankfully, Paul was also excited. Zoe put off thinking about it and sat on Paul's lap before they had some fun together. After their enjoyable time, Zoe got ready to leave. She showered, got dressed, and felt happy. But then Paul spoke up. "This is goodbye for now, Zoe. We can grab lunch here and there, but we need to lay low until we deal with the problem. It's risky if anyone sees us looking at each other or notices you exiting my place." "Seriously, Paul? Do you actually want me to go without seeing you for the next while?" "Think about it, Zoe. Do you want to end up in jail for a long time? Do you want to pretend with Derek for a while? Or do you want to relax with me on the beach for years to come? Make a choice, because if you're not fully committed, we're done. It's either everything or nothing." The idea of losing Paul made Zoe agree to the plan. After she said goodbye, she drove back home. For the following 6 weeks, Derek felt like he was living with the woman he married all over again. They kissed with love, she cooked his favorite meals, and she enjoyed spending time with him. Zoe did such a good job of acting like a loving spouse that Derek started to wonder if he had made a mistake. Every Monday, Zoe would excitedly share with her coworkers about the lovely weekend she had with her husband, full of romance and fun activities. After a month of hearing this, Paul decided to talk to Zoe privately during lunch. "Why are you saying that, Zoe?" "Paul, you won't believe it. I'm following your advice, pretending to adore Derek. Everyone at work thinks I'm head over heels for him, and I bet Derek's colleagues are hearing the same thing too. He's falling for it, hook, line, and sinker." Zoe laughed with excitement. "And you know what's great? I haven't had to have sex with him many times. I said I had a yeast infection and suggested we masturbate together instead, which he really liked. I had to do some sexual favors for him as well." If Paul truly cared about Zoe more than just for her body and money potential, he might have felt jealous. He tried not to react too strongly, but also wanted to show a little relief that Zoe still agreed with the plan. "Good to know. I can't imagine not being with you in the future," he said, looking at Zoe's hopeful face. She truly believed him. Quietly, she thought, he truly cares for me. She told Paul, "You'll have to accept sharing me for 1 more month. Then I'll be yours entirely." 2 weeks later, Derek invited Zoe to go on a weekend trip exploring Hood River. They booked a room at the Hood River Inn, where they used to have romantic nights while dating and in the early years of their marriage. Zoe was feeling stuck, tired of pretending and not excited about revisiting the past with Derek. She was hesitant about spending a couple of romantic days and nights alone with him. Paul suggested a solution to one of their problems that Zoe liked. With the house empty, Paul could make necessary arrangements. If everything went as planned, Zoe would spend one of her final weekends with Derek. Zoe accepted the idea of going on the Hood River trip. Even though she tried, she found it tough to act like a caring wife during the weekend, especially on Saturday night when Derek wanted to be intimate. As Zoe drove home, she couldn't help but think that all the hard work she put in over the past 2 months might have been wasted because of her behavior. It felt like her dreams were slipping away, despite being within reach. Zoe felt foolish as she gazed at Derek, realizing she needed to make things right. She touched Derek's hand gently and offered a regretful smile. "Derek, I apologize. Let's take a break at the Vista House Lookout," Zoe suggested. Close to their destination, Derek squeezed Zoe's hand without a word, parking the car and turning off the engine. Zoe spoke up. "Shall we go for a walk?" Hand in hand, they climbed the steps to the Vista House. Derek stayed quiet, fearing to spoil the moment. Zoe spoke again, gazing at the Columbia River. "I apologize, Derek. My work week was tough and I let it affect our time together this weekend. I should keep work separate, but I struggled this time. I'm sorry." "Is there something specific at work bothering you?" "Not really. I just feel like I'm stuck in a routine every day." "It's not that hard and the pay is bad." "Perhaps that's a positive, Zoe. You might not feel bad about leaving when you need to for a baby." When Derek mentioned having a baby, Zoe's hand instinctively gripped his. Derek assumed she was excited about becoming a mother, unaware that her hand reacted in fear at the idea of getting pregnant. Why did he want kids so badly? Didn't he understand she didn't want to be responsible for children? Zoe thought being a mom would be great until she saw how much Denise changed after having her own baby last year. A year after giving birth, Denise still didn't seem to look well, appearing tired all the time. She kept talking only about the kid, which Zoe found pretty dull. Zoe felt like this was another reason to end their marriage before she ended up pregnant unintentionally. Wouldn't that be terrible? Despite these thoughts, Zoe kept pretending to be a loving wife as they strolled around the Vista House veranda. She brought up a different topic, glancing at Rooster Rock State Park. "Hey, do you remember when you talked me into going to that nude beach below? It's hard to believe you actually took off your swimsuit." Derek grinned, thinking back. "And you even took off your top and put on that tiny bikini bottom. You looked amazing. I had to quickly jump in the river to hide my, reaction. That was my first time swimming naked, and it was great. But I was nervous a big fish might think my private part was food, which made it less fun." Zoe chuckled genuinely for the first time in a while, wondering if Derek noticed the change in her laughter. Derek kissed Zoe, who responded eagerly, suggesting they go home to be close. He didn't hesitate, and they headed back to the car, continuing their journey west. Derek thought about how Zoe's behavior towards him had changed over time, from cold to affectionate. 2 months ago, Zoe's behavior towards Derek changed from being distant to affectionate again. This weekend, she alternated between being cold and loving, leaving Derek puzzled about how long this shift would continue. 2 months ago, Derek reached a breaking point with Zoe's sudden silence and lack of intimacy. He couldn't understand why she was avoiding conversation and physical connection, even suspecting she might be cheating. Every Saturday afternoon, Zoe would say she was either going shopping or seeing her girlfriends. Derek decided to hire someone to follow her. It cost him a lot of money, but after 3 weekends, the investigator said that Zoe was indeed shopping or spending time with a female friend. There was nothing suspicious about her activities. Derek had bad luck because the surveillance began after Zoe and Paul agreed to stay apart. Derek's delay in hiring a PI had big consequences. After their trip to Hood River, Zoe returned to her usual self. Derek was happy to see Zoe, his loving wife. They had a special night together on Sunday, followed by a nice dinner on Monday that Zoe cooked for Derek. They enjoyed a meal of lasagna, accompanied by red wine. The evening ended with them spending more time together in bed. Zoe was filled with joy ever since Monday when Paul told her, "It's all set." On Tuesday night, she spoke to Derek about having both parents come over on Sunday. Derek agreed with Zoe's idea, even though she mentioned they would spend Saturday cleaning the house and yard. Zoe wanted everything to be nice for their parents. On Saturday morning, they cleaned the house by vacuuming, dusting, and tidying up. Zoe made a delicious lunch before Derek went outside to mow the lawn. The lawn was tiny, which made the work quick. Derek began clearing the leaves from the flower beds while Zoe held the bags. "Can you tidy up the bushes too? I'll be making a chocolate cream pie for dessert tomorrow," Zoe said. Derek grabbed the electric hedge trimmer and the extension cord. He plugged the hedge trimmer's cord into an outdoor socket on the patio that had a safety feature. When the trimmer wouldn't turn on, he pressed a small reset button on the socket. No luck. So Derek tried plugging the cord into a nearby indoor socket. Over the next hour, Derek switched between trimming the hedge and collecting the trimmed branches. Before Derek could finish, Zoe appeared and gathered the leftover branches. Derek was about to store the trimmer when Zoe intervened. "You've been working hard all day, poor thing. You must be tired, and I have something planned for you later. Go relax in the hot tub, and I'll take care of putting the tools away." "Oh, Zoe, you've been busy too. I've just been baking a pie, nothing compared to what you've been doing. Get in the tub and I'll be there in 10 minutes, she said, pushing him playfully. Derek stopped arguing, took off his clothes, and got into the tub. The previous owners had put in a sunken tub on the deck, and the water felt just right. When Derek got into the tub, he removed his shorts since the neighbors could see the deck, but not the tub. As Derek relaxed in the water, he felt his back loosen up thanks to the jets. He believed the yard would be approved by their parents the next day. He observed Zoe wrapping up her activities in the yard. He really liked how she looked in yoga pants. Her butt looked great. Zoe was happy to see everything going well. It's satisfying when a plan succeeds, especially with all the potential for things to go awry. Zoe smiled as she gathered the branches and added them to Derek's pile. She then took the electric hedge trimmer and headed towards the house, going up the stairs to the deck. Derek observed Zoe going up the stairs, noting the mischievous smirk on her lovely face before she tossed the trimmer into the tub. His screams suddenly stopped. Zoe found Derek's work shoes by the patio door and quickly moved them next to the bathtub. She began screaming, "Oh my God! Oh my God!" as she rushed into the house and called 911 on her cell phone. The person on the phone tried to help the upset woman to explain what happened. "He got shocked. I think he's not okay. Please help." The person on the phone got Zoe's name and where she lived. Soon after, a police car arrived and 2 officers quickly went inside the house. A police officer saw a cord running from inside the house to the bathtub and unplugged it. Another officer discovered Zoe crying in the kitchen, holding a phone. The second officer smelled smoke and called for a fire truck to come. A fire broke out near the fuse panel. The firemen quickly put it out with a CO2 bottle before it could spread. The EMTs found Derek's body in the bathtub but couldn't help him and suspected foul play, so they kept the scene preserved. The police looked into the incident because it seemed strange. When the police got the upset wife to calm down, she explained that she didn't notice Derek's shoes by the bathtub. She accidentally tripped over them, dropping the hedge clippers into the tub. She narrowly avoided falling in herself. Whenever she was questioned, first by the police officers in their uniforms and later by Detective Turner, Zoe's answer remained consistent. She had tripped over Derek's shoes. Regrettably, there was no evidence to dispute Zoe's claim that it had been a tragic accident. The investigators discovered Derek's fingerprints on the glass fuses and the copper pennies inside the fuse sockets. Paul put on gloves before placing the pennies from the change jar into the sockets. On TV shows like CSI, they make it seem like finding out the patio socket was tampered with by Paul wasn't easy. It wasn't just another issue with the house's wiring. Blaming the accident on the shoes and pennies was clever, making Derek seem responsible for what happened. After talking to family, friends, and co-workers, it was clear that the couple was deeply in love and had a strong marriage. 2 of Derek's colleagues recalled Derek mentioning problems in his marriage a few months back. However, they couldn't pinpoint the cause of his worries, and both noted that Derek appeared content in the past 2 months. Sal Coppolini was informed about his close friend's passing while he was volunteering in Liberia. He was assisting a charity in distributing water filters to villages across multiple West African countries. Sal received a phone call from his mom, who was in tears, telling him that his lifelong friend Derek had passed away in a sudden accident. His mom wanted him to return home quickly as Derek's mom was very upset and needed his support. On the way home to Oregon, Sal thought about his friendship with Derek. They were very different but still close friends. Sal was a happy, romantic person with Italian Latin roots. He enjoyed painting and acting in school plays. After finishing school at Cal Berkeley, Sal worked in Silicon Valley for a small company that made computer games. When the company was sold, Sal made almost $25 million from the deal. People never thought Derek would do well, but he proved them wrong. He believed a powerful leader should run the country instead of Congress. Sal found Derek's ideas amusing. Derek was good at accounting because of his personality. They became close friends by playing football together. From junior high to high school, Sal and Derek were known as the top defensive cornerbacks in their league. They seemed to understand each other perfectly during the game, always cooperating. Derek didn't play football at Oregon State University. He focused on studying accounting to succeed in business. Sal went to Cal Berkeley and joined the Cal Bears practice squad as a cornerback. After studying graphic design in college, he got a job at a new company in the Valley. But every summer, he and his friend worked for Daniel's construction company. When Derek married Zoe, Sal was his best man. Sal spoke beautifully at the funeral. Zoe was emotional throughout the service. Everyone was impressed by Zoe's acting skills, which she learned in high school. She knew how to make fake tears by using a special solution on her kerchief. After the event, there was a small gathering. Sal noticed that Zoe was avoiding being alone with him, which had been happening frequently lately. Sal believed he had a good relationship with Zoe. However, things changed last spring when Sal treated Derek and Zoe to dinner before his trip to Liberia. Zoe seemed moody and quiet at dinner at Jake's crawfish house. Derek even said sorry to Sal for Zoe's behavior. He mentioned, "I'm not sure what's been bothering her lately. She's been easily upset more often. If things don't improve, I'll make sure she goes to the doctor," Sal thought. Last month, Sal got an email from Derek, who was relieved that things had gotten better. After the funeral gathering, Sal and Charlie Conrad, the top quarterback from their high school, went to a nearby bar for a drink. They held up their glasses to cheer for their friend. Sal then asked, "Why is Zoe avoiding me as if I'm contagious?" Charlie sipped his beer and replied, "Zoe's behavior has been crazy. She has been causing Derek a lot of stress lately. Did you know he hired someone to follow her?" "I had no idea. What did they discover? Do you know what happened?" Derek found out nothing after spending a lot of money to have someone follow her while she was out shopping. Why did Derek want to follow her? Derek thought she might be cheating on him because they hadn't been intimate for a while and she was acting unpleasant. He hired a private investigator to keep an eye on her for a few Saturdays, but nothing suspicious was found. After this, Zoe began acting kind and caring again. Derek thought it had to do with work. "She barely talks to me for more than 2 minutes," he added. The friends sat in silence for a while. Sal looked at his beer glass and Charlie stared absent-mindedly at the TV, lost in their thoughts. Sal finally spoke up. "I don't understand. One person claimed Derek skipped the fuse by using a penny, but that's not like Derek. When we worked at Daniel's construction, Derek always cared about safety, especially with electric stuff. Maybe someone else did it." At that moment, Kyle Olson, another team member, came into the bar after taking his wife home. Kyle bought a drink to celebrate Derek, and they moved on from talking about the penny. The following day, on Sunday, Sal wanted to check if he had upset Derek's wife. He knocked on her door in the late morning, but there was no answer. He knocked again, a bit louder this time. On his right, Sal noticed the front window curtain shift. He looked over and greeted Zoe with a smile, saying, "Good morning." A short while later, Zoe partially opened the front door to chat, asking why Sal was there so early. Inside, Zoe was quietly upset at being discovered. She peered out the window to check it wasn't the police returning with more questions. Should she allow Sal to come inside? Could she pretend to have a headache? These thoughts raced through Zoe's mind until Sal interrupted. "Can I come in for a bit, Zoe?" Zoe nodded and held the door open for him to enter. Sal entered the room and immediately saw Zoe wearing a light robe. Sal admired Zoe's attractive features, but made sure not to ogle her. Despite trying to be respectful, he couldn't help but notice her beauty, especially when her outfit accentuated her figure. Maintaining his politeness, Sal asked, "How can I help you, Zoe? I've been busy lately and wanted to check if there's anything I can do for you. You were married to my best friend, and I wanted to make sure you knew I was there to help if you needed anything." Zoe didn't get a chance to reply before we heard the toilet flush upstairs. Sal noticed it too, seeing Zoe's quick reaction as her eyes darted up towards the ceiling, her expression shifting briefly to one of surprise before she regained her composure. There was a quick moment that caught Zoe's attention. She then surprised Sal by asking if he was trying to flirt with her. Shocked, Sal responded, "What?" Zoe pointed out his comments about being there for her and wondered if he wanted to be intimate with her as his best friend's widow. Sal couldn't believe it. He had no idea where that question came from. Embarrassed, Sal quickly clarified, "Oh my goodness, no. I apologize, Zoe. No, we haven't had much time to talk, and I just wanted to make sure you know I am supportive." Sal walked backward to the door, then outside, still moving in reverse. "Feel free to call me if you need anything." Sal then got into his rental car and let out a sigh of relief. Zoe couldn't help but laugh at how easily men, especially someone like Sal, could be influenced. Throughout the week, she played the role of a grieving widow convincingly. She knew how to pretend to cry and have red eyes, knowing the right things to say and even when to act faint from sadness. With some time to get ready, she was able to trick almost anyone with her acting skills, just like she did with Derek. However, she almost made a mistake when Paul unexpectedly flushed the toilet. Sal noticed the surprise on her face. She accused him of trying to seduce her. Sal's face turned red and he apologized as he hurried out the door. "Men are so predictable," she chuckled, calling out, "Hey, Paul, you goof!" Meanwhile, Sal parked on the next street, chuckling to himself. "Wow, she got me good. She's really talented. It only took her a few seconds to get under my skin." His laughter stopped abruptly, replaced by frustration. It only took him 30 seconds to understand what was happening. The smooth kimono, the working toilet, the extra effort to get him to leave the house. The sad widow has a new boyfriend. Sal remembered that no man was with Zoe at the funeral, the church, or the party. She kept a secret man hidden to avoid gossip and speculation. Sal felt overwhelmed and unsure of his next steps. He considered contacting the police but had no evidence to provide. Hiring a private investigator seemed like a good idea, but finding a trustworthy one was a challenge. Derek must have chosen someone useless for the job, and now he's struggling to find someone good. Sal wondered if the insurance agent who sold Derek's policy could help. Sal sat in the rented car and dialed Derek's mother's number. Meanwhile, in another part of the city on that Sunday morning, Bill Rowland glanced up from his newspaper and saw his wife working on her laptop. "It's bothering you, right?" he asked. Karen Rowland stopped typing and gazed at her husband. She was trying to write a mystery story, but he kept interrupting her with his cuteness. Karen was frustrated as she struggled to find the right words. Her attempt at a new hobby was not going smoothly. Karen stood up, tossed Bill's newspaper aside, and settled onto his lap. "I didn't expect to feel this bored after Hannah went off to college. Anthony is always busy with football, school, and his friends, so I hardly get to spend time with him apart from dinner. I don't have much work at the insurance agency, only about 10 hours a week. Most of that time is spent on the computer doing basic background checks. I never thought I would miss investigating cheating spouses." Karen Rowland reached her breaking point 3 years ago. She wanted to have more time with her kids before they grew up and left home. She was tired of chasing after people who were not being faithful in relationships. During one of her final cases, a client became violent and harmed his wife, her partner, and himself. She decided to sell her share of the detective agency to her colleague. For the first time ever, she stayed home for 3 years and focused on taking care of her family. Those 3 years were wonderful, but things have changed recently. She started feeling really bored. 1 year passed when Bill came home and gathered the family for a talk. He got a surprise offer from a big company in Portland, Oregon. They wanted to make him the CFO, which would come with a big pay raise, but it also meant moving from Long Island, New York to Portland. Their eldest daughter was thrilled because her top pick for a college athletic scholarship was the University of Oregon, out of all the schools that had offered her one. Hannah was hesitant about moving away from her parents when offered the opportunity. Their son needed time to consider the proposal, worried about leaving his friends. However, after looking into it more online, Anthony became excited about living near the mountains and enjoying outdoor activities in the Northwest. Anthony could easily switch from Long Island to outdoor activities like hiking or skiing without a long drive. He seemed like a good fit for the change. For Karen, it might be a bit more challenging. Originally from Brooklyn, she graduated from St. John's and spent 10 years as a cop in New York City. Then, she worked as a private detective in the bustling city. The question remained, could she handle the move? Karen thought carefully about the question, as she always did with important matters. She sat on her bed with a notepad and pen, writing down the advantages and disadvantages. After midnight, Karen went to the kitchen for a glass of wine. She saw light coming from Anthony's room as she walked by. She knocked on Anthony's door, waited for him to say she could come in, and then went into his room. "Hey, why are you still awake?" she asked. "Just doing some research, Mom, trying to figure out why it might be good to move there." "What did you discover?" "I think we should go for it, Mom. Kevin Taylor's family moved to Asheville last year, and he keeps emailing about how nice it is to live near the mountains." "He doesn't miss living in the city," Anthony said. "There are many things to do in the city, Anthony," his mom replied. "I know, Mom, but a change could be nice, don't you think? And did you notice how happy Dad looked when he mentioned the job offer? I think being unemployed for a while really affected him more than I thought. He always stayed positive and held on to hope, but I believe he was trying to be brave for us." "I want to be strong for him too," Karen said, feeling emotional. She kissed Anthony on his head and said, "Time for bed, sweetie. There's school tomorrow. Talk to Dad about your choice in the morning." Karen chose not to have any wine. She returned to bed after finishing her list, marked down one more good thing, switched off the nightlight, gave a quick kiss to her sleeping partner, and settled in behind him with a content grin. After the Rowland family's move, a year had passed. Hannah was studying at university. Anthony enjoyed his new school and friends. Bill was thriving with new duties, and Karen sought something to keep herself busy. So they ended up in the den one Sunday night, thinking of ways to help Karen feel less bored. Bill was a great husband in most ways, but sometimes his silly side showed. He tried to make Karen laugh by suggesting he could become more demanding. "I promise to be more tidy," he said. Karen smiled. "Good, then we can have more time for each other." They hugged, both feeling grateful for their relationship. "Do you want to start working as a private investigator again now that you have your Oregon license?" "Not now. I might focus on finishing my novel first, but I prefer the idea of finding a guy to spend my time with." Bill was happy to see that Karen Baker, who had stumbled into his arms nearly 20 years ago while she was pregnant and single, had regained her sense of humor. She fought back with equal humor, but Bill was quick to respond to Karen's jokes. "I know the perfect person for this task. Tomorrow I'll quit my job and we can relax together all day." Karen and Bill were still kissing on the couch when Anthony entered the room with a friend. The two junior high school students quickly turned and headed towards the kitchen. Bill and Karen overheard Anthony's friend asking him, "Do your parents always act like that? Whenever I see them, they're always hugging each other." Anthony responded, saying loudly so his parents could hear, "Yes, always. It's so embarrassing." But Bill and Karen realized he was not being serious. Anthony always expressed his joy to his parents about being in a caring and affectionate family. The following day, Sal Coppolini went to the Montgomery & Sons insurance agency reception desk. It was easy to know which agency sold Derek his life insurance, since the Miller family had used the same agency for 3 generations. Sal quickly provided Mrs. Miller with the information she needed when she asked. To avoid any suspicion, Sal mentioned that he was following up for Zoe. He didn't want to worry Mrs. Miller, so he decided to keep the real reason for his visit a secret. In no time, Sal was ushered into Larry Montgomery's office after just a short wait of less than 5 minutes. After greeting each other briefly, Sal got straight to the point. "I heard about a big insurance policy for Derek Miller's wife Zoe. I'm worried about Derek's death and I want to share my thoughts with the insurance company." "Did you speak to the police about this?" "Not yet. I don't have any solid evidence, just some thoughts." "The police won't change their mind about looking into it again. I'm asking if the insurance company cares at all," Larry said, glancing at some papers on his desk. "But I don't think they want to spend money on investigating if the police think it was an accident." "Why do you think it wasn't an accident?" "I'm not sure. There are some things that don't make sense to me. Can you recommend someone for the investigation if I pay for it myself?" "I'm not sure if I've ever come across a situation like this before." "Why spend your own money?" Montgomery asked. "If Derek died, I don't want the killer to get paid," Sal replied. Montgomery was surprised by Sal's words. The Millers were loyal clients since his grandfather's time. He checked the file again. "I know a private investigator who can help us with this," he said. "I think she's really talented. She had her own detective company in New York after quitting the police. I'll contact her and pass on your details. If she's keen, I'll share the file with her. If she's worried after our chat and checking the file, I'll try my hardest to delay the payment," Montgomery assured Sal. Relaxing in his seat, Montgomery chose to carry on. He felt a sense of trust towards Sal for some unknown reason. "I remember you mentioned covering the cost, but there's another point to think about. If you're correct and this wasn't a mistake, the insurance company will benefit financially, and you'll receive 10% of the savings." Sal was unsure about the situation. "Doesn't the insurance company have to pay the person named as the second beneficiary in the policy?" "Yes, but they will only pay the original amount of the policy, not the extra money for accidental death, as the police believe it was an accident." "So Zoe Miller could get $2 million instead of just 1? "That's correct. Can you please have your detective contact me?" Sal left the office feeling puzzled. An hour later, Sal picked up his phone. Karen Rowland said hello and decided to meet later that day at the Benson Hotel lobby, where Sal was staying. As Karen drove downtown to meet Coppolini, she felt lucky but didn't want to get too excited. Yesterday, she was complaining about needing a new challenge, and today she received a phone call. On her way, Karen stopped to pick up the file from Larry Montgomery, along with support from the insurance company to review the police reports if necessary. Now, she needed a reason to believe this was just a mistake. Sal and Karen met and introduced themselves. They skipped small talk and went straight to the meeting's purpose. Sal shared his concerns with Karen, who asked questions. As Sal answered, he realized the importance of hiring experts. Karen called someone named Glenn to ask for a favor after hearing about Derek Miller's tragic death by electrocution in his hot tub. She mentioned that her family is doing well and had a friendly conversation with Glenn. The mother and a family friend are worried about what seems like an accident. The insurance company wants me to check it out. Can you help me meet the person in charge? Thank you, Glenn. I won't cause any trouble. I can come over tomorrow if you're free. Okay, see you in the morning. Say hi to Helen for me and send my love. Goodbye. Karen glanced up from her papers. I worked with Captain Hutchins on a special team after the 9/11 attack. He'll connect me with the detective in charge of the investigation. If things go smoothly, we might have an ally on the inside. Karen gave Sal a document to sign. Sal read it over, agreed to the terms without negotiating, and put his signature on it. Sal convinced Mrs. Miller to be the official client by signing more contracts. Sal would be paying the bills. Mrs. Miller was hesitant at first, but eventually agreed to Sal's idea. She promised to keep everything a secret for the time being. Derek's mother trusted Sal more than Zoe because of the strong friendship between the two boys. Captain Glenn Hutchins from Portland Police Department's anti-terror team met Karen in the lobby and took her to meet Detective Jack Turner. Turner understood why Karen had come to see him. In a perfect world, I would investigate a case thoroughly, even if it seems like an accident, because I have a feeling it's not what it appears to be. But we don't live in a perfect world, he said. Karen knew that Detective Turner wasn't trying to make excuses. He was just expressing the common frustration felt by many good police officers. Working with limited resources like time and money, sometimes not all crimes are solved and some criminals go unpunished. This is why movies like Death Wish, where avenging heroes take justice into their own hands, are well liked by many people. I have the luxury of focusing solely on this case, thanks to Mr. Coppolini's financial support, the detective explained, emphasizing his ability to dedicate ample time to solving the crime. If I agree to share what I find with you, can we work together? Asked Karen. Captain Hutchins mentioned that you are trustworthy and used to be an excellent police officer. If you agree not to do anything illegal, then we have a deal, Turner replied, reaching out his hand to shake on it. Karen knew that this agreement was important and would greatly assist her investigation. She shook Turner's hand in agreement. Could you bend a bit, but not too much, understand? Of course. Why did you leave the NYPD? You seem too young to stop working. Karen raised her pant leg to reveal her artificial leg. I lost everything below my knee from a shotgun. I could either have an office job or get disability benefits. I didn't want to do paperwork for 15 years, so I decided to start my own agency. I still catch criminals sometimes. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. It happened 10 years ago. I've had enough time to move on. Having a supportive family helps me a lot. In the big picture, my life is pretty good. Turner couldn't help but think about why he had never met someone like Roland. He was currently going through his second divorce. He faced the prospect of paying for upkeep and supporting his kids for years ahead. What's even harder is only seeing his two children part-time and still caring deeply for his wife. Many people assume they can manage being wed to a police officer, but often realize after a while that it's challenging and rethink their decision. He knew his wife Anne loved him but couldn't help worrying whenever he went out. At a recent wedding reception for a fellow officer, one detective got drunk and started talking about all the threats their squad had received from local extremist groups. That night, Anne became very ill, and a week later she told Turner she couldn't handle it anymore. On top of that, she was 6 months pregnant with their second baby, and he cared for her deeply. Turner took out the Derek Miller file. Let's move to the conference room so we can discuss this privately. Meanwhile, Karen was examining the pictures from the crime scene. At the neighbor's house, there's a window facing the deck, and it seems like someone is there. Have you talked to the neighbor? We did try. The owner, named Gail Jones, explained that it's her daughter's room. Her daughter is 15 years old, and Miss Jones mentioned that her daughter didn't see anything. She wouldn't allow us to speak to her daughter without her being there. The girl agreed with her mother's story. Can I have a go? Asked Karen. Sure, but be careful. Miss Jones doesn't like the police much. Her brother is in jail for 3 years. Karen wrote down the names of the mother and daughter, then read Detective Turner's notes. In just 20 minutes, she reached the same conclusion as Turner. I understand why they closed the case. Everything suggests it was just a sad accident, but it all seems too easy, too perfect. I agree, but as I mentioned earlier, our team is overwhelmed. Many officers are now on patrol due to retirement gaps. New recruits are coming in slowly. Some things might be overlooked in the process. 4 to 5 years ago, the department would have supported me to do this, but not anymore. Are you fine with me doing the work? When Karen mentioned the word leg, she saw Turner glance down at her leg, then quickly shift his gaze. He tried to regain his composure. I would be silly to prevent you. Go ahead. I give you my approval and help. Karen gazed at Turner. Do you know how much I miss being a part of the team and wearing the badge? Turner grinned. Yeah, but sometimes I question why I keep trying so hard. They both chuckled. Karen shook Turner's hand and exited the meeting room. As she left, she paused at Captain Hutchins' desk, thanked him, and praised how helpful Detective Turner had been. As she left the building and went down the steps, she suddenly felt sorry and looked back. Karen's next visit was to the home of Mr. and Mrs. Miller. Sal had phoned ahead, so Mrs. Miller was ready for her. Karen grinned as Derek's mom greeted her at the door. The older Mrs. Miller wasn't typical looking. Not a grandma in a flowery dress, but a woman in her 50s with brown hair. She wore a neat blouse and pants like for work. Yet, sadness lingered in her eyes. She had lost her husband and son before turning 60. Karen remembered Bill's battle with cancer and how she almost lost him. It made her feel lucky once more. They were in the living room with coffee and cookies on the table. Mrs. Miller started to talk. I might seem like a difficult mother-in-law, but something didn't seem right in Derek's marriage. Derek and I were good friends. He often confided in me about his tough time living with Zoe. He told me about the mean things she said and how she seemed to ignore him. Derek even suspected she was cheating and hired a private investigator to watch her. Suddenly, out of the blue, Zoe started acting like a loving spouse again. Miller seemed to realize she was being followed and decided to end her relationship with the person she was seeing. Karen made notes and had a chat with Mrs. Miller before saying goodbye. Mrs. Miller was emotional, and Karen tried to comfort her before heading out. Miller remembered something out of the blue. I kept the final message Derek left on my answering machine from that Saturday afternoon. Karen went with Mrs. Miller to the kitchen where the answering machine was. Mrs. Miller played the message and Derek's voice could be heard. Hello, Mom. Zoe and I are excited for your visit tomorrow for dinner. You phoned when I was busy outside and asked if you could bring something. How about bringing your homemade salsa in a jar? Thank you, Mom. I love you. Mrs. Miller was crying when she listened to the message. I can't believe I missed his final call. I was in the shower. I'll never delete this. After hearing the recording, Karen had an idea. Mrs. Miller, I want to duplicate Derek's message. I won't hurt it, I promise, said Karen. Mrs. Miller said okay, but only after Karen promised to give it back. Karen secretly talked to Derek's friends and people he worked with. They all said the same thing. Derek had been feeling sad for about 6 months, and even though he tried to hide it, his marriage wasn't doing well. 2 months before he passed away, everything was going well in the Miller family. Karen managed to talk to 3 of Zoe's colleagues after some effort. Lisa Price's words were what Karen expected to hear. I don't want to gossip, Lisa said, hinting that she was about to do just that. There were rumors about Zoe and Paul Roberts having a romantic relationship. Nobody thought Zoe and Derek's marriage would last a year. People thought Roberts left Zoe when she didn't divorce Derek months ago. Now, Zoe and Derek are being affectionate again. The widow didn't grieve for very long. All we have for now are just rumors and gossip. However, things were not looking good for Zoe Miller. The image of her as a sad widow at the funeral was changing. And now, Karen knew the name of Zoe's alleged lover. She quickly found out where Paul Roberts lived and went to visit him soon. During her first week, Karen talked to people who knew Zoe and Paul. At the same time, Zoe and Paul were spending time at the Miller house, particularly in the bed that Zoe used to share with Derek. After Detective Turner said the investigation was done and Derek's death was an accident, they started hanging out more. Paul was feeling frustrated. Spending some time with Zoe was okay, but now they were together all the time. Ever since the funeral, Zoe had been acting clingy and dependent. Paul needed to stay focused on the reward waiting for him at the end of this chaotic situation. He had to make sure Zoe stayed close by since there were a lot of people trying to get to her now that she was getting a large sum of money. It was surprising to see so many unpleasant individuals suddenly showing up. Paul was annoyed because he had done all the hard work setting up, but now a few guys were reaching out to Zoe offering their help. Zoe, who now had Paul spending almost every night with her, began to question why she thought Paul was better in bed than Derek. When she snuck away to be with Paul in bed, it felt exciting and romantic. Paul treated her in ways Derek never did. She started to see that a big reason she enjoyed being with Paul so much was because it felt like she was tricking Derek. Derek was the one who wanted that house, right? Wasn't it? Zoe was pretending more during sex, but Paul was enjoying it. He was finally having regular sex after a long time. He was getting bored of Zoe, though. They were lying in bed after a quick session and Paul felt like he needed to say something. When will we get the insurance money? Zoe had been dodging the topic, but now he brought it up. The insurance people are taking longer than expected. They are double-checking some things. Someone has been speaking to our colleagues about it. What does it matter? Didn't the police say Derek's death was an accident? Yeah, that's what the detective concluded. We might need a lawyer to help with the insurance company, Zoe suggested. Paul was hesitant about involving more people. That could be expensive. Let's wait a week and see. He knew distracting Zoe was a good way to avoid further talk, so he gently guided her head onto his lap. Zoe noticed a signal and spoke up. Paul's face showed he was pleased, but Zoe wasn't enjoying it as much. On Saturday morning, Karen knocked on Gail Jones's door. The person who opened seemed unfriendly. Karen showed her card and tried to calm things down by saying, "Mrs. Jones, I'm not a police officer." Miller's demeanor softened. "I'm a detective hired by your late neighbor's mom. She's worried about her son's passing and wants me to investigate. Can you spare a few minutes to help me answer some of her concerns?" Jones chose to speak with the detective to support another mother in need of comfort. "Please come in, Miss Rowland. Would you like coffee or a drink?" asked the detective. "Coffee black, please," Karen replied. As they walked to the kitchen, Karen noticed a photo on the mantel. "Is your daughter a track runner?" she inquired. Jones proudly showed Karen a photo of her daughter wearing a tracksuit. "Sharon did really well in the 440 race at state last spring, coming in second as a sophomore," she shared. Passing the framed photo to Karen, Jones mentioned, "We're hoping this will help her get into college. Some coaches have shown interest from a few schools already." Karen replied, "My daughter Hannah runs track for the University of Oregon. She is in her first year of high school. She competes in the 800 meters and the 1600 meters races." Mrs. Jones took the photo from Karen and returned it to the shelf. "It's great when they discover their talent, isn't it? Sharon's grades have gotten better since she started running. She has a GPA of over 3.6. It will be beneficial when colleges start offering scholarships. It helped Hannah get into Oregon, her top pick." The two women sat together and decided to use their first names. Gail made the coffee and Karen began speaking. "Gail, I looked at the pictures from the investigation." Karen said crime scene, even though the death was officially declared an accident. "I saw a window overlooking the Miller's patio and deck in a photo. In this picture, a young lady was watching through the window. Is that your daughter Sharon?" "Yes. Her room has a view of the Miller's backyard. Did we or after that incident?" "Well, there has been a mysterious man hanging around there since last weekend. And the week before Mr. Miller passed away, something caught my attention. I was up late playing video games when I heard the Emersons' dog barking. The Emersons are the Millers' neighbors on the opposite side. I glanced out the window and saw Mr. Miller with a flashlight on the back deck. He stooped down near the edge and then went back inside the dark house." Karen checked her notes. "You're sure it was the Saturday before Mr. Miller passed away?" "Yes, absolutely." "And you're positive it was Mr. Miller?" "I found it strange. Emerson must have been home. Let's just be glad everything turned out okay." Miller was in the backyard checking something when Karen suggested that Hannah could help. Karen then invited Gail and Sharon to have brunch with her and her daughter next Sunday. Sharon wanted to talk to Hannah about college recruitment. Gail thought it was a great idea and Sharon was very excited. They planned to meet for brunch the next Sunday. Karen left the Jones house and went to the Emersons' house down the street. Tom Emerson opened the door with his big black lab in tow. "Hello, can I assist you?" Karen gave Tom Emerson her business card and explained, "I'm here to look into some inconsistencies about your neighbor, Derek Miller's passing." Emerson appeared taken aback. "I thought it was an accident." "I'm trying to confirm that for my client. Are you with the police?" "No, I'll be honest with you. I represent Derek Miller's mother and best friend. They are worried." "Wow. Does she believe Zoe did it on purpose?" Mrs. Miller is unsure about what to think. She just wants to make sure everything is being done to find out the truth. "What do you want to know?" "Did you see anything strange at the Miller house recently? Like a week before Derek died?" "No, I recall they were away the weekend before. Derek was unpacking his car, and when he saw me, he wondered if the electricity had gone off. He mentioned that his oven clock was flashing, showing that the power had gone off. I explained that our power was fine, so the issue must have been with his panel. It all made sense when a week later, firefighters had to extinguish a fire in his panel after an accident occurred." With nothing else to add, Emerson and Karen said goodbye as she left for home. She didn't notice the man at the Miller's house watching her. He saw her go from the Jones place, pass by the Miller's home, and ring the doorbell at the Emersons. He kept watching as she walked back to her car. It was easy to guess that he was the detective Zoe mentioned. "Wow, this is getting really tricky," Paul muttered to himself. Paul thought about what he could do next. He thought about harming the investigator or even Zoe, the only person who saw him. He knew where he could find a weapon. Paul sat down and thought about how he might hurt two people without getting caught, but he couldn't stop thinking about the $1 million. If he found the cash soon, he would travel to Mexico or Central America. Bill and Anthony sat in the den watching a football game when Karen entered. Bill greeted his wife with a hug and kiss, asking, "How are you?" I'm pretty sure they did it. The wife and her boyfriend. I don't have definite proof yet, but I have some clues that make sense. I will organize my notes for you to review. Do you want to get food delivered tonight? You and Anthony choose, all right? Okay, Bill smiled. Karen has been working on her cooking for 3 years now, and often has dinner prepared for the family. The old version of Karen was focused on solving a problem and catching the bad guys. After climbing the steps to shower and change, Karen mentioned, "Hannah will be home next weekend." It made Bill happy. Karen then took a relaxing shower, put on comfortable sweats, and sat on the bed with her notepad and pen. She had all the details about the case and knew the who, what, when, and how. Now, she just had to gather evidence to support her findings. She made a list of potential leads on another paper. This is where being a private investigator differed from following strict police procedures. She had more flexibility to explore different angles. Having a client with a lot of money was also a big help. She phoned Sal and set up a meeting. Sal didn't want to wait until Monday, so they decided to meet on Sunday afternoon. After they finished eating, Bill looked over Karen's notes. He agreed with her that it seemed like a plan to commit murder, and he shared a few more ideas with her, which is just what she was looking for. Bill wasn't as experienced as his old partner Hank when it came to investigations, but he was clever and loved reading mystery books. He knew that most murder cases followed similar patterns. Ever since Poe's Auguste Dupin and Doyle's Sherlock Holmes, writers have been making smart bad guys and even smarter good guys. On Sunday afternoon, Karen and Sal got together in Roland's den. Karen wanted to make sure no one else could hear what they were talking about. She went over what she had found out so far. Sal felt incredibly sad when Karen finished speaking. He sat back in his chair, using his handkerchief to dry his eyes. Sal then gazed out of the window before asking, "So, Zoe murdered him to get the insurance money?" Karen gently placed her hand on his, offering comfort that Sal was grateful for. "She's convinced that Paul Roberts loves her. When I looked into his past, it seems he might be taking advantage of her. He considers himself a ladies' man. We can use this to break up their plan." "How?" "It will require spending some money. Are you really willing to spend whatever it takes?" Sal didn't hesitate. "Are we going to catch these bad guys?" "Yes." "Then do whatever it takes." Karen was happy that Sal agreed. What detective wouldn't like a client so determined? "Okay, one more thing. You mentioned you were in the gaming industry before.